Is living in Tualatin, Oregon going to cost you an arm and a leg? Stay tuned to find out. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Paul Clem with the Home Team Brokers coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And if this is your first time to the channel living in Oregon, make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. We've helped so many people relocate to Oregon and move to the Portland metro area. As real estate professionals, we'd love to help with that process. So if that's you, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click that link down below in the description of the video and schedule a Zoom call with us. Either way, we would love to help with your move to the Portland area. All right, in this video, we're going to talk about the cost of living in Tualatin, Oregon. Tualatin is an area that tends to fly under the radar a little bit, in particular, for people who are relocating to the Portland metro area. It's not the biggest suburb by any means. I think it's about 10 square miles, maybe a little bit less. And when you look at like an area, say like Tigard just to the north, Tigard is closer to 15 square miles, Beaverton is over 20 square miles, Hillsborough is closer to 25 square miles. So, you know, it's not as large of an area. There's not as many employers, for example. So when people are relocating from out of state, Tualatin is typically not a place that is on their radar. When they do ask about it, it's always something that people tend to mispronounce. So for the record, it's Tualatin. But even for people here locally in the Portland metro area, you know, if you grew up on the west side, the east side, you know, north maybe up in Vancouver, you know, south down in areas like Wilsonville, again, Tualatin might fly under the radar a little bit because it's not necessarily an area that you would go to visit very much. There's really not much there going on aside from that suburban lifestyle and just kind of the standard suburban offerings. So you do have some great shopping. You know, there is like Bridgeport Village, for example, strip malls. The Cabela's is there, so a lot of people like the Cabela's who like the outdoor activities, hunting, things like that. But either way, I think for Tualatin, for a lot of people, you know, it really checks a lot of boxes if they're looking for a quiet, safe community that is really pretty laid back, and I think above all, a really suburban area. I mean, really the only other area, maybe a couple, but really the biggest area that I would compare this to, the biggest comparison is an area like Happy Valley on the east side in Clackamas County, where really, you know, you drive around the different neighborhoods in Tualatin and it's just very suburban and pretty new for the most part as well. We're going to talk all about that in this video. So what does it cost to live there? If you're thinking about moving to Portland, you're looking for an area like Tualatin, maybe this has come up on your radar already and you want to learn more about it. Well, first and foremost, we have to start with the housing. And this one comes with a little bit of an asterisk because when you look at Tualatin right now and transaction history for the last 3 months, Tualatin has the highest median sale price in Washington County being the suburbs primarily on the west side and southwest side of the Portland metro area. So the median sale price right now in Tualatin is $640,000. When you break that out, when you start to look at what you can get for, you know, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, and down the line, the median sale price for a 3-bedroom home is $607,000. The median sale price for a 4-bedroom home, $720,000. And the median sale price for a 5-bedroom home is $770,000. The median sale price for a condo is $300,000. That's pretty much on par with most of the Portland metro area. And the median sale price for an attached home, like a townhome, is $410,000. That's also pretty on par with what you find across the Portland metro area. But when you break that out, $607,000 for a 3-bedroom home median sale price, that is a little bit above most suburbs and most areas in the Portland metro area. When you look at a 4-bedroom home and a 5-bedroom home, really kind of that mid-700 range, that starts to be a little bit less than some other areas, say like Beaverton, for example. And I think in Tualatin, there is a high volume of homes that have been built in the last 30, maybe 40 years. This was an area that really developed over the 70s, but really into the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. You see a lot of big planned communities and big housing developments like you would see in a lot of other suburbs. And so these newer houses, these newer construction, there's going to be smaller lots, but they're generally going to be a little bit larger homes. So your price per square foot is probably going to be a little bit better in Tualatin, and you might very well be getting a little bit of a newer home than if you were to be buying in like a Beaverton or a Tigard, again, just to the north of Tualatin. All right, next we're going to talk about the commute in Tualatin, and we talk about the commute in the context of the cost of living because, of course, commuting expenses can really add up for people depending on how far they're traveling, but also just when you look at lifestyle, when you look at things that people like to engage in, hobbies, activities, things that people like to get out and do on the weekends, travel, etc. This is all going to come into play when you're looking at where your house sits within the Portland metro area and how convenient the access is to work, play, activities, hobbies, schools, all that good stuff. So Tualatin itself, again, is 8 square miles. So getting around Tualatin, getting to the grocery store, getting to a restaurant, something like that, it's going to be pretty quick. I mean, 8 square miles is not that large really for a suburban area. So this is a pretty small town when you look at the city limits. I should say too, and this maybe ties into the previous category, is that Tualatin is really pretty densely populated. And so, you drive around, there's just a ton of neighborhoods, a ton of houses, not a lot of open land, vacant land that hasn't been developed yet. So this is an area that really by and large has been mostly developed when you look within those city limits. But back to the commuting, you're looking at 23 miles to PDX, the Portland International Airport. You're looking at 13 miles to get up into downtown Portland, 10 miles to get into Beaverton, 7 miles to get into Lake Oswego, which is going to be just to the east of Tualatin. There's also an area called Stafford that separates Tualatin from West Lynn and Lake Oswego. It's kind of this big, open, nice, mostly rural, but kind of high-end luxury area. It's a really nice place just to go out and go for a drive. So if you're in Tualatin, you can get over to Stafford pretty easily, but going through Stafford, you would then get into either West Lynn or Lake Oswego, which are popular places to go hang out. Downtown Willamette and West Lynn is a great place to go out and, get food, get dinner, whatever it may be. Same with Lake Oswego as well. Tualatin itself doesn't really have that much of a city center. It has the Martinazzi Plaza, which is right there off of I-5, so that is kind of the city center, but you're looking at more like strip malls, a few hotels, some fast food, a couple of decent restaurants, but not a ton as far as offerings for dining. So if you live in Tualatin, you're probably going to find yourself traveling out to surrounding suburbs quite a bit, as well as traveling into downtown Portland. You can get up into Beaverton pretty quickly. Again, that's 10 miles, but Beaverton is huge, so to get over the city limits through Tigard into Beaverton, you can do that pretty quickly. I mean, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops, depending on traffic and everything. But one thing to note, I think, for Tualatin is that you're right on I-5. So there's a lot of suburbs, like Tigard, for example, Sherwood, even a lot of areas in Beaverton where you're really kind of buried and you don't have access to that main freeway, being I-5 that goes north-south through the Portland metro area. And so being right on I-5 does give you some unique access to get up into Portland, whereas you might be able to get up into Portland quicker than, say, like into downtown Beaverton, for example. It might even be quicker than getting over into Lake Oswego because obviously you can drive a little faster on the freeway. But either way, I think in Tualatin, you kind of have a sneaky good location as far as access to getting out to surrounding areas. Again, living in Tualatin, you're not going to be driving a ton for your day-to-day. Now, it's really going to be where you're going to work. If you are commuting for work, if you work up in Beaverton, up in Hillsborough, which would be very common, or in the city up in Portland, it's not so much the distance traveled, but some of those routes can get really backed up. Portland does have some pretty bad traffic during rush hour time. So, in the morning from about 7:30 to probably 9, maybe 10 a.m. And then in the afternoon, really starting about 3:30 probably till about 6 p.m. So your commuting and your commute times, could be pretty long in Tualatin, but you're not necessarily putting in a ton of miles, which, leads to the wear and tear on your car and of course the gas, obviously. So Tualatin is really pretty good when it comes to being in a suburb, but having some relatively good accessibility and probably having a little bit less auto expenses when you look at those items. Okay, next we're going to talk about the age of the homes. And again, we're talking about this in the context of your cost of living. Now, two primary things come up when you look at the age of your homes relative to your potential expenses. And that's going to be the age itself. The older the home, the more potential there is for deferred maintenance. So if you have a 100-year-old home or even a 50, 60, 70-year-old home, there's probably a greater chance that, there's some old original plumbing, electrical, other systems like, the furnace, the water heater, whatever it may be, where you may need to come in and either invest some money right away to fix some of these systems, or these are going to be things that might come up sooner the older the home is. Now, the other thing is with older homes, you tend to get a little bit larger of lots. So, the older your home, the greater the likelihood that you have, maybe 8,000 square feet, 10,000 square foot lot, like a quarter acre, up to maybe a third of an acre lot. And the larger your lot is, the more landscaping expenses you're going to have. And, that might be actually putting forward money to pay somebody to come maintain the landscaping, or, if you let it kind of get bad, having to maybe spend quite a bit of money to have somebody come pick it up eventually, or just your time, right? So if you have a lot of trees, if you have a big yard, a big lawn, a lot of plants and things like that to maintain, obviously committing the time to do that is a sacrifice as well. So in Tualatin, like we had talked about, this is an area that has really been developed over the last 40 years, primarily, really 50 years. So back in the 1970s, Tualatin had a population of 750 people. There was a time where this was just a truck stop on I-5, 13 miles south of downtown Portland. As Portland grows, it kind of grew in every direction. Obviously, Tualatin was an area where that urban growth boundary in the metro area expanded into. So the population jumped up to 7,500 in the 80s, so from 750 to 7,500 in the 80s, up to about 15,000 in the 90s, up to 23,000 in the 2000s, up to 30,000 people today. So you look at that population growth, and of course the housing development that would have needed to take place to sustain that population growth, you can kind of work backwards from that and say, okay, most of the homes in Tualatin have been built or were built from the 80s to today. And again, Tualatin really has been filled in pretty well up to this point. You don't see a ton of vacant land that's still being developed, although you can still get some new construction in Tualatin. But more likely than not, when you look at that period from the 80s to maybe the early to mid 2000s, that's when you had the greatest period of population growth, and the population is still growing, but not nearly at that same rate. So if you buy a house in Tualatin, the pretty good chance that it's going to be built, it was built in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s. And so again, I think, when you look at this through the lens of the cost of living, in particular as it pertains to deferred maintenance, ongoing maintenance, landscape maintenance, things like that, you're probably going to be in a home that has a lot that is relatively small. So you're not going to have this huge, enormous piece of property with a huge lawn and all this maintenance and upkeep. And, a home that was built 40 years ago, that's probably going to have needed a new roof, maybe, a new furnace, new water heater, maybe some of those things a couple of times over. And so it's not necessarily the case that, if you do get into a home that was built in the 80s and 90s, that it was maintained perfectly. So these deferred maintenance items definitely could still exist, but you're going to have a greater chance of, less issues getting into a home, again, that was built in the last 30, 40 years. All right, next let's talk about the entertainment costs. So kind of like I had alluded to, there's really not a ton to do in Tualatin. There is some pretty good shopping. You do have great selection as far as like grocery stores, for example. But I think you're really looking at some very typical suburban offerings, and there's really not that much to do in the way of entertainment. There's not as high a volume of like bowling alleys and movie theaters and things like that like you would find in a typical suburban area. I think if you're in Tualatin, again, you're probably going to be traveling outside of Tualatin for a lot of your quote-unquote entertainment. And again, that could be up into Portland, anywhere in Portland, depending on what you like to get out and do. Go get over into Lake Oswego or downtown Willamette and West Lynn, for some nicer restaurants and some better offerings there. Of course, up into Tigard. Tigard really doesn't have a ton to do either. You really got to get up into Beaverton if you're looking at some other suburbs on the west side where there's going to be just more to do, more to offer, and more opportunity to get out and spend money. I think Tualatin, like many other suburbs in the Portland metro area, a lot of the things that people would be doing day to day are going to be free. So there's some really great parks in Tualatin. There's a lot of great greenways, walkways, walking paths, areas just to get out and walk around, which of course a lot of people like to do. Tualatin is really heavy on families. It's a very good area for families, and I think a lot of families do flock to that area. So getting out and taking the kids for a walk, taking the dog for a walk, those types of things. There's no shortage of opportunities for that in Tualatin, especially when you look at like the Browns Ferry Park or the Tualatin Community Park. These are parks that are right on the Tualatin River. There's areas where you can get onto the river and actually take out a kayak, take out a paddleboard. It's a really slow flowing, calm river, and a lot of people like to get out and do that. There are some golf courses in the area, so if you like to golf, there's the Tualatin Island Greens, there's the Tualatin Country Club, so there's a private golf club in Tualatin. Just south down I-5, there is Langdon Farms, which is one of the more popular public courses in the Portland metro area. So there is opportunity to get out and access some great golf courses. Obviously, golf is a little bit more of an expensive activity, so a lot of this comes down to lifestyle, obviously, right? But it's not really going to be the case that in Tualatin there's going to be opportunities to get out, multiple nights a week and spend a ton of money, going to like really nice restaurants and things like that. You're just not going to find a ton of that in Tualatin. Okay, next we'll talk about the taxes, specifically the property taxes in Tualatin. We did a video explaining property taxes in Oregon. I'll put a link to it right here so you can see that. Property taxes are levied on a county by county basis. So when you look at the Portland metro area, you have a tri-county area with Multnomah County, where Portland is, Clackamas County to the east, Washington County to the west, and in Washington County and Clackamas County, taxes are going to be a little bit less than in Multnomah County, so that's something you've probably heard us talk about. And there's not one specific tax rate in Washington County, so it really depends on where your house sits and what tax districts you live in. There might be special tax assessments for specific areas, for specific types of properties, but when you get your taxes at the end of the year, you can see a full breakout, itemized breakout of where your taxes went, broken out into two primary categories, which is government and schools. So government, that could break out to obviously the costs of, the city government, the local government, but also like utility districts and things like that, development for parks and roads and infrastructure, and then of course schools. So where your house sits and what elementary school you feed into, what middle school you feed into, those things can make a little bit of a difference as well. And in Tualatin, there is only one high school. I should mention two, Tualatin High School, and Tualatin shares a school district with Tigard Tualatin School District. So either way, when you look at taxes, on average, if you're in Washington County, you're always going to be less than Multnomah County for the most part. The effective tax rate, usually, what you could kind of assume would be the tax rate is going to break out to about 1%, give or take. The effective tax rate when you look at Tualatin is closer to 1.1%. So the taxes in Tualatin are a little bit higher when you look at property taxes. And some of that might have to do with the area having been more newly developed. So in Oregon, property taxes can't increase by more than 3% a year, and it's 3% of the assessed value, not the market value. So in a lot of states, like in California, for example, When you buy a home, that resets the tax assessment and resets what the property tax is for that year and moving forward. That doesn't happen in Oregon. The property taxes don't change based on a real estate transaction. The assessed value cannot increase by more than 3% a year, and that was started in 1995. And so you have a lot of homes in Tualatin that were built around 95 and that are newer as well. So you have a lot of homes that probably started with a little bit higher of a basis for the tax assessment amount, or the assessed amount rather, for the property value, the assessed value. And that's why you might see property taxes being just a tick higher than some other areas in Washington County. But like we've talked about, property taxes are public record. So when you go to purchase a home, you can see what the property taxes were for the previous year or the year that we're currently in. You can look at that number and reliably add 3%, and that's typically what the property taxes are going to increase by. If they increase by any more than that, it's based on local bond measures, things like that, that were voted on, within that municipality or within the county. Those things do happen, but they're typically not, astronomical as far as what that would add to your annual property taxes. Okay, next let's look at childcare in Tualatin. The cost of childcare, full-time childcare, obviously one of the bigger expenses for most households, for most families, is the cost of childcare, if that is something that a family is doing. So the average cost of full-time childcare in Tualatin right now is about $800 a month, which is definitely on the lower end when you look at other areas around the Portland metro area. A lot of this just comes down to supply and demand. Currently, there's 52 providers for full-time childcare, daycare, things like that in Tualatin. So Tualatin being a little bit of a smaller area, 30,000 people, 52 providers. That in part at least might be contributing to holding those costs down a little bit. There's other areas that you would want to consider depending on where you're commuting to for work potentially. So if you are using childcare that is closer to your office, for example, and your office is in downtown Portland or up in Beaverton, up in Hillsborough, childcare could be a little bit more expensive on average. So those are going to be things to consider. And I think for sure there's going to be opportunities in Tualatin, just like anywhere else in the Portland metro area, where you could pay $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month for full-time childcare. So I think, with 52 providers, there's going to be a pretty big range of offerings, not just on cost, but also what you're getting, for your money, that you're investing in childcare. All right, lastly, let's look at the median household income for Tualatin, $98,000. That is notably higher than many areas of the Portland metro area. That's going to be higher than Tigard, Tualatin, Hillsborough, Sherwood, other areas on the west side in Washington County. And, it's tough to say exactly what the contributing factor to this is. Tualatin itself is a pretty homogeneous area. So you drive around Tualatin, you see really, I think by many measures, very nice, well put together neighborhoods that are definitely going to attract folks who maybe are of certain means. Now, that's just an observation, of course, but I think there's probably some truth to that. And in Tualatin, again, you have nicer, larger homes, a little bit more expensive on average, although, again, your dollar can probably go a little bit further based on price per square foot and what you're actually getting, like we had talked about. But again, you just have such a high volume in Tualatin of nice neighborhoods, nice houses. So, I think that's reflective of, or vice versa, the median household income of $98,000. So when you look at cost of living as a whole in an area that maybe is a little bit more affluent on average, generally the cost of things are going to rise to, the means that people have, or vice versa. And so I think in Tualatin, it might be the case where you do find that things might be a little bit more expensive, but it's not going to be, by a noticeable amount necessarily when you compare it to the surrounding suburbs. And if Tualatin is an area that looks interesting, sounds interesting, you want to learn more about it, you got to give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link down below in the description of the video. Schedule a Zoom call with us, and we can talk about your budget, your timeline, what you're looking for in an area, what you're looking for in a home, put together a home search for you, and start to get you more information about Tualatin or other areas that you might be interested in. So when the time comes, you're ready to hit the ground running with a game plan. And if this video is helpful, make sure to hit the like button. That helps us out a lot. If you want to get more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. As always, we really appreciate you watching. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.